So next up, we have Cezanne, who is going to take us into the panel discussion real quick. She has been a classroom teacher in Kenya, Nicaragua, Romania, Japan, and the United States. Okay, let's just pause there, because that's a lot of perspective that she's going to bring to the table. She's also a dyslexia specialist for the past 5 years. Her exposure to these cultures and how they approach literacy, combined with her methods to advocate for former students with dyslexia, inspires her to spread all the knowledge she can. Cezanne is a member of Decoding Dyslexia Oregon's Diversity and Equity Council. So let me just pause and pass the mic, and she will take us into our next section.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Mitchell, as well. My daughter was really excited to see your name on this list because you just read to her class, her first grade class, a few days ago. So I was excited to, yeah. So she was excited to see that. So thank you for doing that. And I loved everything that you just said. So I'm so excited because this panel is going to be pretty incredible. This is a group of individuals who are walking in the shoes of all of the topics we're talking about today. They're all, of color. They have dyslexia themselves, were diagnosed at young ages. They all have some wonderful perspectives. So I'm so excited to introduce these individuals today. So first, I'm going to introduce Dr. Derek Smith. Dr. Derek Smith never saw his dyslexia as a roadblock to achieve his dreams, but rather his special power that made his achievements, like obtaining his PhD, all the more special. Derek's dreams of making a difference led him in the direction of working with diversity and inclusion programs to help shape a talented and diverse workforce. So there's Dr. Derek Smith. I also want to introduce Ms. Raechel Harris. She's a freshman at a local Portland area high school, and she's also a Decoding Dyslexia Oregon student advocate. She's struggled with dyslexia for a long time, and for as long as she can remember, and it has made reading and math hard for her. But she's also seen firsthand how important it is for students to have teachers who connect with their students, celebrate their strengths, and honor their learning styles. And then I also want to introduce Mr. Rex Thronson, maybe he will be a doctor, is a freshman at local Portland area high school as well, and was formally diagnosed with dyslexia in 2nd grade. He's passionate about raising awareness about dyslexia and is a Decoding Dyslexia of Oregon student advocate, and serves on the student panel of the International Dyslexia Association Oregon branch. So there's Mr. Rex Thronson as well. And before we begin our panel questions, I'd love to give you guys a few facts about dyslexia before we begin. If you've been fortunate enough to be a part of the other groups and the sessions in the links, then you'll probably be more familiar with some of these facts. But before I begin, I'd love to just share my screen and share some of these things. So first of all, dyslexia is a significant difficulty with reading, writing, and spelling. Dyslexia has no correlation with intelligence. Another important issue is that dyslexia is not visual. People very commonly believe that it is. Dyslexia involves trouble with manipulating sounds. Dyslexia has a very strong genetic component as well. This can cause apprehension for families to have the confidence to request services. Dyslexia is 10 to 20% of learners. That's up to 1 in 5 students. And our panelists will get more involved in diagnosing and misdiagnosis. So this is a fact that's very important to know about your students. Dyslexia is better described as a superpower than it is a disability. Dyslexia is a learning style, not a learning disability. And finally, if you look more closely at the creative people around you, the ones who always think outside the box, those in the room who develop incredible things with their hands and who see what many others do not, they might be dyslexic. So now I'd love to open it up to our panelists and ask some questions of them. All right, so welcome guys. So my first question that I'd really like to dive into and get straight to the good stuff is, how do you feel about being identified as having dyslexia? what's the most difficult part? Does it bother you that you have dyslexia? Who'd like to start?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay, I'll go. So for me, I've never actually been bothered about being dyslexic. Like, it's never really bothered me. I've always been open about it. Like, when I'm reading things and I struggle to read in a classroom, especially in public schools, like I don't get bothered over the fact that I say that I'm dyslexic. Like, it doesn't bother me, and I feel proud of it. Because I just think of it as just an obstacle that I can get over, and it's nothing like a barrier or anything like that. It's just something that makes me unique in my own special way, because then I end up finding entirely different ways to comprehend something.
Thank you for sharing, Rex. Dr. Smith, would you like to go next? And then Raechel.
Yeah, it changed for me over time. I was diagnosed decades ago, and I would say I was a bit ashamed because of my dyslexia. And even throughout my adulthood, I try not to bring it up because people are very ignorant of the experience. And but I do believe that it is something that actually has strengthened me and actually helped me navigate many problems on so many different levels. So I'm not ashamed at that level, but at first going through it and having a difficult time in the school system, there wasn't a strong feeling of confidence with dyslexia, but now that's completely different.
Yeah, I can tell that. That's great. Thank you for that perspective as well. And it's interesting to see the shift, as you explained to us earlier when we met privately, that you grew up in the 70s, 80s and diagnosed then. And so now we're listening to Rex talk about being a high school student in the present and maybe his shift in view of how it feels. Maybe that's a sign of improvement. Raechel, do you want to speak to this as well?
Yes, mine has also shifted. I've learned to embrace it, and I'd gladly tell anybody now. But when I was in elementary school, it would bother me a lot, like being Black in a mostly white school. I already felt different, and like having dyslexia was another like add to that. And so it's like really hard for me to tell people that.
Yeah, that's a unique perspective too. You already had one difference that was clear to everybody. And then when you're sitting in the classroom to have this other difference that would come up as well. Yeah. Thank you all for answering that question. My second question is, do you remember a specific experience when you wish that maybe your organization, your school had done something differently for you? And maybe if you were to do it over again, what would you change? I know Rex and Raechel, you guys wanted to speak to that.
In elementary, I was pulled out all the time, and I was put in like a special ed class, mostly with boys with behavior issues. And I wish that it was different and that I wasn't placed in that and actually placed in help for dyslexia. And that was really hard because I wasn't getting the actual help that I needed. And I wish
that it was different. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Rex?
Yeah, so for me, I have been to a lot of schools, some private and some public, and I've noticed some very different things with the private schools and the public schools, which some of the things that the public schools do is more or less just if you are a special student or a special ed student, you go to classes that help you, and the teachers try to help all the students there, but like the teachers that I kind of ran into didn't really understand how to help me in some way. And so I believe I was in 5th grade when I started going to another special ed class that I needed. But the teacher didn't really know how to teach me like reading and stuff like that. Like if I was struggling with a word, she would either give it to me or she would just like have me spend like 10 minutes trying to figure out the word, which wasn't helpful for me because I would just be sitting there trying to figure out the word, not knowing where to like divide all the syllables and everything like that to understand what I was going to like say for the word and stuff like that, which made it very difficult. But being in like a private school, I noticed that the schools were extremely attentive to actually what I needed. Because they were more, well, not only because they had like a better budget for everything, but they were more understanding of the students and knowing that like they needed help and they wanted to help those students, which I always thought was really nice. And the teachers that I've met there were really nice to me, and they had always kind of been supportive in any way and as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that you have both experiences going to both schools and you can compare and contrast what worked better for you. And then I feel like the benefits and what was a success for you are more obvious and you can direct people towards that more. So thank you for sharing that, all of you. And with that, with support, I wanted to go to another question. How might your life have been differently if your parents had not taken such an active role in your education? How might it be different for parents and for students, I guess, if their parents were not taking such an active role? What would it have been like, maybe?
Well, so I definitely think for me, it was the difference between being alive and not being alive. I wouldn't have been able to deal with life. I don't think I would have made it this far in life. I don't think things would have been ended up the way that they have. My parents were very active in my education, and I know that from the way they explained it to me, the way that they became active was that it was much of a battle dealing with the school system, because we're talking about, once again, in the 70s, and even now, you know, parents coming into the classroom kind of demanding things is always going to be a bit of friction, but they were on a lone island dealing with this type of situation. And so I don't think they will have given me as much attention. In fact, they ended up having my mom in the classroom with me side by side. And the funny thing is I think there's a lot more of one-on-one instruction that probably is needed for a lot of students, at least for a short amount of time.
Mhm.
And had she not done that, I went from not being able to read starting first grade to the end of third grade, transferring to another school district and being placed in highly gifted and talented class because she sat side by side with me and tapped out, you know, with me, you know, syllables, and we practiced phonetics. And it really, for me, she applied it across the board, and I needed that type of attention. I don't think I would have ever gotten that in our school district, probably because it was publicly funded, but more so it was designed not really to help me. At least that's the way we felt, particularly because we were in the minority as far as our ethnicity and race. And I just don't think they were there to help us, and we were more of a burden. My father had a lot of legal background as well as business, and so he made a negotiation, and that's how she ended up in the classroom. I don't know if that would happen now. I think we need to use politics more, but that's my long and short story of it.
It's a great story. And I think it sounds like they took a huge role in your education, were extremely involved. And so thank you for giving that perspective. Rex and Raechel?
Yeah. So for me, I've always been lucky because I've had a mother who, well, when I was 2 years old, or I was born in Guatemala, and when I was around 2 years old, my mother adopted me and brought me home to the US. And I was fortunate enough to have a mother who was able to not only be able to like afford a diagnosis for me, but also being able to afford everything that I needed. Because I know some families just aren't able to afford things for their children who actually need the help, and they're like not getting it because they can't afford it. And I've just always been glad knowing that like my mother has always been there for me, and knowing that she has a good job that can actually afford to pay for everything that I need, like all my classes, books, and things like that. If I need help with that, she's always been there to help me with class and stuff like that. And if I didn't have her today, I don't know what I would be doing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great story. I love your whole story and where you've ended up. So thank you for being so forthcoming with that. Raechel, would you like to share?
Same thing, really. I've been really fortunate that both my parents can help me and advocate for me and get me everything that I need to be in the place that I am now. And I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you all for sharing that. So the next question I would want to pose to you all is, what advice would you give to a parent who thinks that their child might be dyslexic? Or what advice would you give to someone who thinks that they themselves might have dyslexia?
You know, as both the child and as a parent now, I think it's really important to really ask the hard-hitting questions and to make sure things are quantifiable, and that you get really not just anecdotal information from your teacher, but you talk to specialists and then ask them to really document what you're talking about. I mean, when you have special education students, we often have those, you know, individual education plans, those IEPs and things like that. But I think a lot of times parents wait for the conference that is annually or, you know, biannually planned to actually talk to parents, or for parents to talk to teachers. And they really should just have their own regular check-ins. You know, if you can't, you know, come up to the school and see the teacher because of whatever reason, COVID or just the rules, then, you know, plan to have some type of meeting with them and then go over their progress. And I find that what often happens is that people who don't seem like they have support, meaning students that don't seem like they have support, they get ignored. And the same thing that happens with adults too. If they don't seem like they have someone advocating for them and they don't speak up for themselves, then they can't really seek out the solutions the way. And it's not that we expect parents and or individuals to have the expertise of, especially the people we're hearing from today and previous presentations, but we can have the desire and the focus of seeking that out for ourselves and our children. That's the first thing I would do.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, we can't wait. And if you suspect something, then go ahead and get right on it as soon as you can. That's what I hear you say. Thank you for sharing that. Rex and Raechel, did you want to add to that? All right, well, thank you. Let's do our next question. What about teachers? Let's talk about teachers a little. What are a few of the best tactics that teachers can make to support their child, their student with dyslexia? Anybody? We can always come back to that question if you'd like. Okay, go ahead.
I'll go. So like I've said, I've been in public and private schools, so I've seen the difference that teachers have had. Like one of the things I've noticed, which kind of hurts me a lot, is I've seen teachers in public schools who want to really help the students who have learning disabilities. Like they're really passionate about it and they want to help the students there in any way that they can. But I've noticed some of the materials that they buy to help those students is actually coming from their own salary that they make. And this school isn't giving them any money to use it. Like they spend their own money trying to buy these things to help students, which is really sad because, I mean, they're spending their own money and they're trying to help you, but the school isn't doing really anything about it. Where I've noticed with like all the private schools, most of them have had or have been willing to help the teachers in any way. Like if a teacher wanted something for a student or needed these certain materials to help this student learn different things or learn in a different way, the school has always been there to help that teacher as best as possible and make sure that the student and the teacher are getting what they need so they can help each other. And just having that has been really nice.
It sounds like I'm hearing a common denominator of needing the support, whether it's financially or through time. We need that extra support to help these students out in class. And without that, like, how can we give this explicit instruction and make sure that these kids are the best they can be? Anyone else want to touch on that?
Yes. I find that it's really good that like the teachers know the accommodations that the kids need. And I've been really grateful. My third grade teacher would really give me the confidence that I need with my work that I would do in her class. And every single time I made a success, she would sit at her desk with me and I would email my parents about that success that I did that day. And I thought that was really nice and I got to look forward to doing that.
I love that. We have to celebrate every success. So I love that you guys did that together. Thank you for sharing. Derek, did you want to touch on that at all?
You know what? They said it just very well. You definitely have to celebrate each success, but more so with our teachers. I wish that they could have more support in the classroom, and that's obviously money and changing of situations. Because, like I said, I had to be drawn out of a main classroom for reading, and it seems like from everything we know now, that instruction would have helped those other people in the room just as much as it would have helped me. And I think, we need a lot more hands on deck. And because my parents forced their way in the classroom, unfortunately, that's the only way I could have really learned then, because they weren't going to provide the para or the one-on-one instruction. And they really didn't believe that my mom was going to show up in there every day, and she did. So it's just, yeah, I wish they had more help.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I definitely think that even through my own teaching experience in the classroom, there was a point when I realized that when I was teaching even to English language learners, I was not just benefiting them, I was benefiting the entire class. And so I think that goes with it, and it goes along with best practices that I know other presenters were talking about in education as well, is that if we have the resources to learn these best practices, they're not just benefiting specific groups of kids, they can benefit everybody if we're doing it right. And so with that kind of comes along with having the funds, the finances, and the laws behind it to back it up, and we'll be making a much larger impact if that happens. Thank you for sharing that. So with this, I have another question. What's something that maybe a question that you are kind of tired of hearing on dyslexia, or something that people say about dyslexia in passing that maybe you would like to debunk right now? Who might want to speak to that?
I love complaining, so there is one, and I think we talked about it the other day, is when someone says, "Oh, that's my dyslexia," and they kind of discard it as, something that you can catch or something, or just they make fun of it in that way when they read something, opposite or backwards, or they mix up something, and that's just, it was a struggle. You know what I'm saying? It was very traumatic to be not just dyslexic, but also to be, a minority and be considered dumb. It was shameful. And like I said, my mom was in the classroom, so I was even more shameful, embarrassed, but it helped me deal with it And I think it made me much stronger because I look at things so much different. And if they knew, and this is why I'm saying it's a superpower, they knew, just like we were saying, like you see people like blind people and like, Ray Charles, and how the mom taught him, like, you need to use your other senses. It strengthens your other senses. So my perspective and analysis of things is much different because I was challenged and am still challenged with dyslexia. It makes me call upon many more things in my repertoire to deal with problems. And it also helps me deal with failure, because I dealt with a lot of failure. I was not able to read for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden success. It helped me deal with success and comparatively. So I just think people are very cavalier by using dyslexia as kind of a joke situation.
Yeah, I agree. I've heard it from my own students who are not dyslexic, say it in passing if they mispronounce a word, or oh, I'm dyslexic or something like that. So yeah, it's we don't want to demean the situation, and we don't want to take away from those of you who are actually gone through and really pushed through the difficulties of experiencing it. So I like that you pointed that out. Rex and Raechel, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, for me, since I've been in public and private schools, it was really nice to see the difference that kind of the students, well, it still bothered me sometimes, but the difference that some of the students would ask was like, in a public schools, all the students would like think I was dumb and just wasn't smart or anything like that. And then they would sometimes come up to me and be like, hey Rex, so is your dyslexia affecting your vision? Is that like why you see things backwards, or like are the words backwards, or are they just like off the page or messed around with? And that's always bothered me, because it just annoys me hearing that question like 6 times a day. Where when I was in a private school, I would notice more of the students were like actually more accepting of you. Like they wouldn't, it almost seemed like they kind of understood what you were going through, because they wouldn't just be like, hey Rex, does your dyslexia affect your vision, and do you see things backwards? It would be more like, hey Rex, what is it like to actually have dyslexia? What happens when you start reading? Like, why does this actually happen to you, and why do you struggle? And I've always just kind of seen the two different things, and that's kind of what I like about both students, is each one is kind of different in their own special way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's powerful. All right. What else? Anything else that you guys want to say for your final words to make sure that people know, remember, take away from our talk today? Any of the three of you? The floor is yours.
Well, here, what I would like to say as a person who was really able to kind of jump to success levels is that, we have to not only just advocate for changes in schools, but just as a practice, both as educators and parents, a lot of the things that work for kids with dyslexia can be applied across the board. And one thing we didn't really talk about that happened in my life is my parents allowed me to find my passion, whatever that may be. And the good thing about it is I wasn't always good at my passion, but you know what? I tried a lot of things before I was able to read. I tried archery, I tried soccer, I tried baseball, I tried art, you know what I'm saying? I tried singing. And when you get passionate about something, particularly when you have troubles, just like when you have troubles with dyslexia, you learn how to overcome issues. You learn how to stick to it. You learn about the steps that incrementally that you get to take for that. And you learn from the experts, or you seek out that expertise because you bring it to life, because it's part of what you are. And so my parents allowed me to feel success and failure, and particularly allowed me to really be innovative. And I think that's really important when you talk about dyslexia. If you look about all the famous people who are dyslexic, they're run across the board of some of the most influential people in the world, whether it be Picasso, Henry Ford, a whole bunch of actors and actresses. I guess, there's a lot of potential here for all of us, not just dyslexic people, but others that aren't achieving because we haven't given them the tools.
Yes, if you look at it in the right way, it is a superpower and it is a learning style. It's not a disability. We can't look at it like that. Anything else from Rex or Raechel before we close out? All right, thank you guys so much. This was really powerful, very impactful, and I hope that everyone watching can take something away from this and maybe change their style up a little bit more, their approach, so we can benefit all of the students. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. So we are going to allow you to take a 3-minute break. That's all you get is 3 minutes, or take as much as you need. But we're going to jump all the way back into room A to do our wrap up for the day. Of course, self-care on your own, but we will do our best to start back up at 1:50. I promise you, I know it's been a long day, but this ending part you don't want to miss. Our next panelists are again amazing, as they all have been, but you don't want to miss it. So self-care, do what you need to do. Come on back to room A. So the main session, we'll all be back there, and see you guys in a minute. Thank you all.